huge thanks to Suki and the last panel, one of which has continued on. Very good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. You're joining the Bloomberg Rainbow Plus Forum, our inaugural session, part of the Bloomberg Diversity Week. And it's great to have alongside me, Inga, Beale, who's on the first panel, chair of Mediclinic, Paco, Ybarra, Chief Executive Officer for Institutional Clients over at Citi, and António, Simões, Chief Executive Officer at Santander Spain and Regional Head of Europe for Banco Santander. Thank you all for taking the time and making the time to be part of this discussion, because diversity is more than gender and it is more than race. One report that I read, we love a statistic and a fact at Bloomberg. It's Stonewall's LGBTQ plus Britain report. A third of all LGBTQ plus staff have hidden or disguised their status. They're afraid of discrimination. I find that number shocking. That's not shocking to me from 1989 when I started in banking, but that shocks me now. Inga, let me take it to you. You've worked at the heart of the city. Are you shocked that a third of all staff still remain hidden?
I was when I first read that from Stonewall, and I still am shocked that it could be the case today. I have a story from my time at Lloyd's which will never, ever leave me, because it goes even worse, or it goes beyond that. When we launched the Employee Resource Group for the LGBT plus community, I had one of the men who'd been working at Lloyd's a long time, over 30 years, come up to me on the launch of that group. And he had a tear in his eye and he said, Inga, thank you. Thank you for this day. I never thought I would see it. And I assumed he was going to come out of the closet, having been in the closet for 30 years. And instead he told me that his son was gay and he'd been in the closet at work about his son for years, for fear of banter, for fear of judgment, for fear of some sort of criticism. Now, that wasn't that long ago, and that will always stay with me, because it goes way beyond even the LGBT community themselves. We're talking about people at work hiding all sorts of things and being embarrassed about things, even when it's not necessarily them themselves. When you try and unravel it, why are people scared? I don't know. I stayed in the closet about my sexual orientation for over a decade. And this was probably the first 10 years of my life. I thought I was just heterosexual, so I didn't think it was going to be an issue. And it only became an issue as things changed in my life. But I still stayed in the closet for a year, despite, I know, working for a very welcoming and supporting company. Why did I do it? It's fear of something, fear of all sorts of repercussions. So I'm disheartened by the data. I do my best to speak up, and I know on the panel today, you've got people who are always speaking up about this, and we need more and more people to speak up about it and give courage to the others who are coming into the workplace to be out and to be themselves.
And I think that level of disclosure, whilst it might be personally very difficult to do at various moments in our careers, is incredibly empowering to a younger generation behind us. António, let me bring it to you. There are still a limited number of CEOs out there who publicly identify. Inga is still shocked that the number's at 30%. Can you just tell our audience, I mean, you've got to the top. How difficult a journey was it to tell that story along the way?
Thank you, Manus, and good afternoon, good morning, everybody, and it's delighted to be here. So for me, being gay and being out is a big part of who I am today, and definitely that journey of authenticity didn't start that way necessarily, a bit like Inga, but it's a big part of who I am. And so it started, so just to give you the context, I was born in Portugal in the 70s, a reasonably conservative environment, and I was closeted a bit to Inga's point. Up to university, really, I was out to a few people. And when I started working, and this statistic of the 1/3, there's another statistic, which is people go back into the closet when they start working, even when they are out at university. I joined McKinsey at that point, and I was not out. And that first phase of my journey, what was interesting, and this was 1997, is that McKinsey, a couple of years before, in 1995, created what I think must be one of the first LGBT groups in the world, which has the most fantastic name as GLAM, Gay and Lesbian at McKinsey. And although I had joined McKinsey in Madrid and Portugal, so Portugal and Spain, it was very conservative. This idea that this global company I worked for had this, on the other side of the rainbow in the US, but globally had this amazing organization, for me was really, really important in that first phase. And still today, now at Santander for over a year, we have an equivalent group, Embrace. We have more than 6,000 employees. And still today, for me, that's really important because I think of my 20-year-old self, and there is someone somewhere else, maybe in Europe, that I lead, who's not comfortable today, the 1/3 that you mentioned, Manus, and these groups are very important. My journey became then more authentic when I went to the US. I studied at business school in the US. It was easy to be out in New York. And I came out for the first time at work at Goldman Sachs, which at that time I was in investment banking. There probably wasn't another investment banker that was out. I think I came out by mistake, to be honest. I told HR that I was going to be with my boyfriend in the flat that they gave us. They were delighted because HR always wants to have some role models, and that I went on from there. I joined HSBC in 2007, which is the year I also got married to my husband, so a very happy year. And then in 2012, around the time, Inga, I met you, I was the CEO of HSBC in the UK, and I gave an interview where someone said, actually my head of comm said, well, I don't think you should mention your husband, because a bit in the previous panel, Beth made the point about I wanted to be the CEO. It was the first time I was a CEO. I didn't want to be the gay CEO. But I thought about it in my mind, and I did talk about my husband and my 2 Labradors at that time, and it became a bit of a thing internally. And I think, Inga, you'll remember, because both of us were at that outstanding list from Suki back in, I think it was 2013 and 15. Obviously, the list became much better because then Inga was then number 1 when there were more leaders. So there was a lot in that journey of authenticity that became, Manus, to your point, a big part of who I am as a leader today. I think I'm actually a better leader for having come out and having a bit more authenticity.
And I think, and this is where I'd like to take it to you, Paco, which is, I think, to Inga's point, I think it's fear that drove me for a long time in the first 10 years on trading floors in brokerage houses, fear. Now I sit in a very much more confident, comfortable position. So Paco, that's what I wanted to bring it to you, which is, I know that you lead the Citi's Pride Affinity. Do you create, going back to Beth and Inga's point, a culture where you can be comfortable to say, yeah, I happen to identify somewhere in the LGBTQ plus spectrum. Do you create that culture through that group?
Well, we try. I mean, that's the intention, right? Is creating an environment where there is really no obstacle for people to reveal who they are. I mean, it's not easy to do, and we have to be aware that even with best intentions and with people that are really fundamentally not resistant of this thing at all, there are still unconscious things that happen and things that still give people pause before coming out. I have to say I don't have the experience of coming out, but I understand the core of that decision, and I know that fear is one problem. There is also the case, of people that we know are gay, but everyone knows are gay, but they have decided not to come out as well. And you have to wonder what is stopping them from just being themselves in that context. Well, all we can do is to create the conditions that would make it easier and easier, and in the end, is a personal decision of its person. And I think what you can do is just try to make it the easiest possible. And my attempt has been to encourage particularly senior people to be a bit more outspoken. I have found that when senior people, like my 2 colleagues in the panel, come out, that probably has much more impact encouraging junior people in the organization to come out than anything else. So I have a little bit of a personal a personal effort put into convincing some people that are not that outspoken. Some people have come out, but they don't want to be very outspoken. They don't want to be very participating in things they don't want to be defined, as we heard just a second ago, by being gay. But I think the impact that they have on the organization is so big that I think I'm really trying to encourage them to take a more active role.
Well, let's just develop that, because sometimes I think when I introduce myself, I like to introduce myself as I'm Manus, I'm an anchor at Bloomberg, I'm an ex-banker, I'm an ex-broker. You know, the list is long before I ever get to who I am. Inga, and I go back to this because I've been on that floor at Lloyd's. I've done lots of pieces on that floor. I know the company that you work at the moment is geographically very diverse. How powerful is it, do you think? Do you think there's a soft power with disclosure?
When I was having a lot of opportunity, I had a lot of opportunities at one time to have a platform.
Right.
And first of all, I shied away from using it because I thought, oh gosh, I've just got to be me. I've got to be respected. I'm already having a challenge as a woman coming in. I can't let people get focused on anything else. I've got to prove that I can do the job without distractions. But the more I had those platforms, the more opportunity, I thought, I've got to speak about this. This is not good if I don't do it, if I don't use the opportunity to be in an influential position and say something overt about it. But do you know it often takes courage, and I haven't always had that courage. It's not always in you. It really isn't. And even today, I can be in situations where perhaps I don't have that much energy that day, or whatever's happened, or I've got something else in my mind, and I don't perhaps call something out when I should have. Something inappropriate was said, and I don't do it, and I don't necessarily have the courage to speak out on topics. So we are humans after all, and we've got to also remember that. But people today, if you reveal a lot more of yourself, which people do today, and I particularly learned it from the young generation actually. They said, Inga, you're the CEO, but we want to know you as a person. I thought, oh, gosh, what does that mean? Well, you've got to have your Instagram account. Oh, God, I was thinking, I can't do that. But they said, no, we want to know you as a person. So I started to reveal much more of myself. And then when people get to know you, you don't actually have to be outspoken about things if they know that it's part of your personality already. But using a platform, to me, and using your influence is important. There's almost a responsibility to do it for others, but you don't always have the courage to use it.
No, I can see Antonio smiling there. I just hope your Instagram account isn't going to be trolled later on. Can I bring it back to you, Paco, first of all, because this is about who you hire, who you have on your senior management team is incredibly important, because to see LGBTQ+ at the top may inspire a younger generation to think, yeah, do you know what? Inga got there. You got there. Sorry, Antonio got there. The roadway to the top is not going to be blocked because of who I identify myself as being. So is hiring in one's own image, whether that be a certain profile, is that something which you try to sort of encourage against? Think broadly, hire broadly, go beyond borders.
Yeah, we've tried to deal with those unconscious biases in hiring and the impact that they have on diversity. And we have done that by trying to force diverse panels in interviews and trying to make sure that we consider diverse candidates, that we impose certain conditions on how things are going to work that fight some of the biases that we have ingrained and the organizations have ingrained. I think in the case of the LGBTQ community, I think it's a little more difficult to do because of the numbers first, and also because not everyone is outspoken or has decided to self-identify. But the impact is the same. When you're successful in appointing someone or promoting someone that is seen as a member of the community and has a senior position, as I said before, that is probably the most effective, or one of the most effective ways to create normality around these things in the company and in the community. So it is so to see it as natural and to see it as the obvious thing that has to happen. So it is, I think it is something that we try to encourage. It's not, it is easier to do on other dimensions where numbers, the quantitative approach is easier to manage, right? But I think even in this one, we try to understand the numbers as well. And we try to understand the numbers at different levels, but our understanding is imperfect. We're trying to improve, our understanding is imperfect.
Perfection is a wonderful place to be. People that criticize me when I'm on air on a daily basis, I go, I'd love to live in your world. Paco, let me bring it back to you because I just want to close off and then I'll bring in one of the audience questions. To encourage recruitment beyond one's own image, how important is it?
I think it's me or Antonio. I guess you're addressing Antonio now.
Antonio, my apologies. Antonio.
Yeah.
Thank you. You're saying if it's important to recruit beyond your own image, you say? Well, I think obviously we're preaching to the converted here, right? This is a panel on diversity, so I think it's really, really important. I've heard Inga talk about this earlier, which is we all have our unconscious bias, and I think you, Inga, said that you recruited a lot of women at an earlier stage in your career. So it's important that we also, as very diverse individuals, recruit more broadly. And I think that visibility that Paco was talking about is really important. I think we have a responsibility, and I think my view has evolved over the years that particularly in this case as LGBTQ leaders, we need to be visible. I think we stand in the shoulders of giants, the kind of expression. So someone has done the work before us, so we can now be the CEOs. And to your point, Manus, I got to be CEO in an open way, so it didn't come out afterwards. So I think it wouldn't have been possible to do that 20 years ago. So I have a responsibility to do that. But I think beyond that, I think a lot of our allies have also that visibility and that responsibility. I'm wearing our little pin from Santander, but I was just in the UK. I'm today in Madrid, but we were in Cornwall actually. A transgender customer actually felt comfortable talking to one of our employees because this is voluntary, but a lot of our employees use it, or we have the pronouns now in the badge. So that visibility, which might sound like a totally simple thing to all of us. I remember when my kids were born in the US, I went to Target to buy nappies, and the guy at Target had a rainbow flag, and I don't know, he probably was straight, it was just an ally, and I felt super comfortable because I was very nervous that day. And so there's an element of visibility for all of us as leaders, and something Inga said, I couldn't agree more. It reminded me of a story, you said this in the previous panel. Challenging the wrong behaviors for all of us is incredibly important. Early in my career, someone made an homophobic joke. They didn't know I was gay, so it was just a joke. But my boss, who was there, was also his boss, knew, and he probably did it because he believed it was the right thing. And he said, look, if you do that again, I will fire you, literally those words. And when your boss does that, it gives you the confidence to challenge. It could be racist, it could be homophobic, it could be a gender biased comment. I think it's important all of us, to your point, Manus, across all strands of diversity, challenge those behaviors. So I think there's a lot that we can do.
I think that goes back to Inga's point earlier, talking about a customer turning up at the office and her boss said, well, if you don't talk to Inga, you don't get to talk to anybody. You know, that's a very powerful thing. I think, Inga, that talks more about maybe the power of the person who was your manager, standing up in an organization. Let's bring in an audience question. Look, it reflects back slightly, Inga, on a question that you had earlier, but our other panelists perhaps will have an opportunity to respond on this. CEOs in recent years seem to have very carefully pick the issues they're comfortable speaking out on, and when they do. Do you worry that this approach reflects the CEO's own unconscious bias and levels of personal comfort? So it's about cherry picking, I suppose, the things that you're prepared to talk out about. Paco, can I bring that back to you at Citi? You don't strike me as a man that cherry picks, but do you think there's a risk of this at senior management?
Well, I think CEOs, whoever is in the public sphere, has to be very worried about what they say in public, because you're speaking to a world that is very difficult to predict in its reaction. So I understand a level of paranoia around that for anyone that is speaking publicly, but that cannot get in the way of being sincere. I don't think there is. I mean, the CEO has to represent the company's values as well and talk about all the issues that are important to the company, but they also may have their own personal preferences, and there is nothing against a CEO picking from that and after referring to the general values, something that they want to hone in and they want to speak more about. So I'm not sure that is a problem. If it doesn't get in the way of being also outspoken about the other things that are important to the company and to the community that they represent. I'm not sure if I'm answering the question in that sense, but I think I think CEOs have to, in their position, represent fundamentally what the company that they represent, the cultural values of the company that they represent.
Well, I think that's important, which is, if the CEO speaks out, just make sure you're speaking out for the right reason and not to blur the other important issues.
But Manus, may I just say about this feeling of comfort? Because I've had times when very senior people, I remember it, this guy was being asked to host and launch the first LGBT plus network group. He wasn't from that group, but he was the boss, so he had to talk about it. He came to me and he said he'd never been so nervous about opening up such an event. He was worried about fumbling LGBTQ plus acronym. Well, I mean, who wouldn't be? It's getting so complicated. All these things, he was very, very genuinely worried about it. So unless someone is actually forcing people to take on these tasks, they may not volunteer because they may say, I don't feel comfortable. I can talk about this. And the issue today is, of course, most people can see if people aren't authentic. They can feel if they're not talking genuinely. And that's also something else. But we can help people feel comfortable about talking about these other issues by involving them in conversations so that they have a better understanding.
Yeah, I think that is about the art of education. Paco, let's just close off this question with you, and then we'll go to. There's a good question here. So just quickly with Paco, your response on this, on the cherry picking what senior CEOs will or will not talk about on LGBTQ+.
You mean me, Antonio?
Antonio.
Yeah, you.
Diversity of names. We need Paco to stage.
Name tags. I'm an anchor. Unless it's written in front of me, I struggle.
Thank you. You have a very hard job, actually. So I was. Look, I agree with Inga. I was thinking exactly the same thing. I think we need to make people comfortable with different aspects of areas, and I would have the same. I have some reverse mentors on race, for instance, which is a topic that I was brought up in Portugal, which is a 99% white sort of background, and actually I felt from a race perspective I wanted to be able to relate to people that could teach me how could I talk about it properly. And so I think there is an element of, as CEOs, I use my own story to then relate to the broader diversity topics. It wouldn't be authentic of me to speak about experiences that are not my own, but equally, when I talk about, I very rarely talk about LGBT issues, actually. I normally talk about broader diversity and authenticity, and I use my story to connect to that broader diversity story. I think other CEOs have the same challenge, to use their own. All of us at some point in our lives have felt like an outsider, even the sort of white, straight male individual at some point. And so relate to that authentic story and then relate to the broader diversity agenda, even if you don't know all the acronyms, exactly as Inga was saying, and actually have the courage to step into it.
And you're right, those acronyms are growing in length, but maybe that's a good thing. It broadens the conversation. A couple of quick questions, and this is more so for Inga and Paco. Very, very quickly. Inga, do you think you had to work harder and more than other people who do not identify in LGBTQ+ to get where you got to?
It's all about whether you belong in the group or whether you feel you belong in the group, I think, and how accepted you are. So that's a huge question.
I know.
I remember, not feeling part of the group. I felt different because of the first 10 years, I was the only female in a male world. Now, that was hindering my own confidence in myself. It was sort of keeping me back. I was putting my own glass ceiling above me almost. And I think that happens along the way. And you can be in situations where you feel like the outsider. Some people might make them feel good, but most of the time we feel a little concerned, a little underconfident when we're in a group where we're the different one. And I think that's the issue here.
Paco, just very briefly back to you. Did you have to work harder than everybody else in the schoolyard to get to where you got to?
I think it's Antonio that you're asking, right?
Yeah, Antonio, excuse me.
I'm not sure, actually. Maybe I did at some certain stage. Also, bear in mind I have an advantage versus what Inga was saying, which is actually I'm a white male. Actually, if I don't come out, I'm in the majority, actually. So there is an element of up to the moment that I came out, I probably was always seen as being part of the majority. maybe in my own mind, overcoming my own obstacles and my own internal insecurities probably was the most difficult thing. And once you own that, I think I am actually a better leader now. I normally make the joke that I'm short, balding, Portuguese, gay, kind of. There's a lot of aspects of being different that have allowed me to connect in a more empathetic way. And exactly as we were saying earlier, for not the next generation, we have 190,000 employees, of which 70,000 in Europe. People want an authentic self. So my story is actually more interesting, and I can connect better as a leader because I've embraced that. So if anything, now it's become an advantage, I would say.
We've got just under 5 minutes left. Paco, when you look at the structures within Citi and in the boardroom, what would be the one message for, look, we're dealing with diversity from lots of different areas and different agendas, reach for share of voice. It's women, and it's color, etc. But when it comes to this issue of LGBTQ+, what's your message at board level?
So I think it is part of the general discussion on diversity, and at board level, the discussion that we're having and the effort that we're putting is in trying to get a better sense of numbers so that we can think of this dimension of diversity the same way we think about the others, and we can analyze ourselves and see what is going on in our organization across different geographies, across different levels of the organization. We're trying to, so a lot of the effort that we have had board support on has gone into encouraging self-identification of employees, funding the build-up of networks, and both community networks and affinity networks, so that people have support around them as they come out or as they decide to become more active in the world. So creating much more discussion and awareness around the organization about this, so that it becomes something that is in the day-to-day of everyone, and that eventually leads to people identifying themselves and as understanding where do we have problems, and that comes to the board, will get to the board as well. Eventually in a world where things were happening in a natural way without any kind of bias, in a board our size, we should have people of so it has to get everywhere. But I think the process to go through the normal tools that we have and that we're not perfect on, by the way, on any dimension of diversity, but the tools that we're using, those tools can be used in this regard as well, and make us more successful.
Inga, what's your message at board level when you deal with diversity, but then do you touch on LGBTQ plus at your chair level in your current role? Is it something that takes up a proportion of time? Does it come up at board level?
It depends I'm on a few boards, and they're all at different levels of maturity on this. I have to say, for one of the boards I sit on, our huge operation of ours is in South Africa, which has very, very clearly defined people who were less, they were marginalized in the past. And that's very clear. They're people of color and they're women. And so they've got a nice clear thing. And that's what we focus on. We don't focus on LGBT plus yet. But my hope is that over time we can start focusing on things like that. And the other boards, I'm afraid, why am I afraid? I'm very proud that we're talking about women and racial representation. I'm perhaps less proud that we're not really yet talking about LGBT.
And António, to close off, what would you be your message?
Look, I think we all need to be more visible. I encourage everybody. Well, not my panelists here are great advocates, and Inga has always been very visible. But for us to be visible and authentic, I think this is about being authentic as a leader. It makes you a better leader, but also we stand in the shoulders of giants, as I was saying, and therefore we have a responsibility to improve the world. And that might just be wearing a pin if you're an ally, or it might be challenging the wrong behavior, or being more out and authentic if you happen to be LGBTQ+. So I think there's still a lot to do, and we can continue to improve.